They must have gotten Daniel's messages. No, they would have been here by now if they were coming. I live in R18 too. I thought I was, but I looked again and it's R18.
You're moving on up, Peter.
Yeah. We're pretty close to the border. Yeah. I did. Stepping up. Well, you know, I saw the extra value of the lot, and that just
You thought you could afford
buy a car.
the car. That's right. Extra 0.16.
Yeah.
If nobody shows today for the first two items, I will know that it's one person moving everybody around. Hopefully, I got that person.
The U of U released a study this week on property values in Salt Lake. Did you see that?
But I thought
Oh, yeah.
that would be inappropriate.
Yeah.
To mention it because they say it doesn't affect them.
Well, that houses close to new apartment buildings appreciate faster than those that are farther away.
I just thought there was no effect, so that would kind of counter.
I don't have access to
Right.
We're talking about apartment.
Yeah.
That is always an argument that comes up. So, and I know I've seen evidence to the contrary, so I know that it just depends on what do you decide to say.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's evidence to the contrary. I think it depends who you.
Yeah.
Mic. Okay, at 7 o'clock, we're going to convene this meeting, and we will get started. I asked Commissioner Coombs if she would give us the lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Phillips if he would give our opening remarks.
Please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful that we're able to be here as a planning commission and to be able to discuss the needs of the city and to be able to be together in an effort to serve those that are our residents. We're grateful for this town that we live in and for the community that it is. Pray that we'll be able to be respectful and listen attentively and have a productive meeting. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, both of you. Before we begin our official business, I just want to take a minute and thank for Commissioner Fugel for his service as our chair over the past year. He did a fantastic job in a year that was far from ordinary. and he just kept us going and led us well, and I just want to thank him for his efforts. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. All right, we do have some changes to the agenda. As it was noticed, we will be continuing items 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 will all be continued to next meeting, the March 11th meeting. So if someone would like to, I'd entertain a motion for.
Maybe mention which. We remember the public.
Oh.
That the Macon properties.
Yes, the Macon properties were, the items 1 and 2 are the rezone and vicinity plan amendments for the property located at 1445 North, 600 West, otherwise known as the Macon property. And those items will be heard at next meeting on March 11th at the request of the applicant, Artisan Builders. So with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those changes.
I'll make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda with the changes that have been so noted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll also move to the staff reports. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And are there any changes or any? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve those. These would just be the staff reports for items 3 and 4.
I'll make a motion that we approve tonight's staff reports.
I'll second it.
Great, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move on. Are there any declaration of conflicts or abstentions from commission members? Okay, seeing none, we will move to our business and our first item. As I mentioned before, items 1 and 2 have been continued to the March 11th meeting. Those were the items affecting the rezone and vicinity plan amendments for the Macon property. They've been continued to March 11th at the request of the applicant. So we will move to item 3, which is a public hearing on a text amendment regarding storage and the Grove Zone District Boulevard Mixed Use Overlay, and it is to consider the request of McKay Christensen to amend City Code Section 10-1427-2E, storage by modifying limitations for storage uses within any unit, only within the Grove Zone District Boulevard Mixed Use Overlay. And we'll also be hearing item 4 at the same time. So that is also a text amendment at the request of McKay Christensen to amend City Code Section 10-1427-3A, density of allowed uses by changing the requirement for certain dedicated uses for buildings, parking areas, drive aisles, and/or out parcel directly fronting Pleasant Grove Boulevard within a minimum buffer of 64 feet, only within the Grove Zone District Boulevard Mixed Use Overlay. We'll turn the time over to Daniel. I think he's presenting these 2 items.
Chair, Commissioners, we had a huge meeting and it turned into a small meeting, which makes the next meeting a huge meeting. The items that the chair presented today are 2 code amendments proposed by McKay Christensen. They're applicable to the mixed-use overlay zone. The mixed-use overlay zone, it's a zone that was created just for this parcel, 10.7 acres. So that's the mixed-use overlay zone. At the time when this overlay was proposed, it was the intent to actually do a development that it was mixed use, that will have some commercial and some residential, not just next to each other, but being even in the same building somehow. That's usually the definition of mixed use. So the idea of this was to create that overlay that will allow for some, again, residential uses and to allow for some commercial uses. When we brought this idea to the City Council, and first to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council, when we brought this idea, it was a new idea because if we take a look at everything that we have along the Pleasant Grove Boulevard, there's not a single parcel fronting the boulevard that has residential, not a single one. When we were talking about the Grove, we were trying to, that's the gate to the city, right? That's how we always have referred to the boulevard, the gate to the city, and then we wanted to have all commercial uses there. Even here on Green Grove, which is actually a different zone because the Grove ends right here. Let me see if I actually have, yeah. The salmon color ends right here, and this is commercial cells too. But even on something like that, we didn't allow the residential to come all the way to the front. If we remember, we approved a car sales right here. They're struggling with some access uses, but it's a different story. And then here we're working on a couple of restaurants, commercial paths. So we were trying, even on the CS2 zone, to preserve these uses, that every use along the boulevard, and from here all the way till the intersection, not the intersection, the ramp, the access to the freeway, there's not a single residential use. However, when we created this overlay zone, we wanted it, this was completely commercials. It was a commercial cells, sub-district of the Grove. But for the development on this, we were requiring the connection, the continuance of this road to be right here. Knowing that that will cost an amount of money in order to offset that, we talk about adding some residential uses. The applicant at that time proposed for 25 units per acre. It came to the Planning Commission. Actually, the creation of the overlay zone came to you guys three times, right? And we make 3 changes every single time until we finally, the Planning Commission and the City Council were fine with the language that contained on that ordinance. And again, the applicant proposed 25, the Planning Commission recommended 21 units per acre, and the City Council gave 23 units per acre. That was the final decision. If we just take into consideration this 10.7, which might, this 10.7 acres, if we just got to 23 units per acre, that's 250 units, something about that. Take a little less or a little more than that, okay? So those are the number of residential units that we're going to have to fit into those 10 acres, right? Again, when we tried to do that, and we understood that the creation of the road and stuff like that, the applicant needed to be very using some design tools. He needed to be very creative on how he was going to put all those uses. I remember a site plan was shown around that time. And I was talking to the applicants before the meeting. That's always a little dangerous when we have just a code amendment, not a site plan approval, but just a code amendment. Because usually when we draft code, we tailor it to whatever the idea is. And that's exactly what happened. Later on, as you start developing and coming up with an actual site plan, then usually what happens is you realize, oh, maybe what I want to do right here, it may not play along with the code that it was already written. That's maybe the caveat, and that's why I think we have said this, same as City Council, always like, take the site plan with a grain of salt, because, usually, I would say 80%, 85% of the time never ends up happening like that. Okay, changes come along the way. You may realize later on that you have wetlands. You may realize later on that you have a high water table, and then things change dramatically. Or that you have some easements that you need to put on the property. Whatever, there's many things that could happen. So there were, again, when we created this ordinance, when we drafted this ordinance, there were 2 items that now the applicant is proposing to amend. When we allow for those 23 units per acre, the exchange for that was that, and this is an idea from Planning Commission and staff and everybody working this, was to require 25,000 square feet of sales tax generating uses, right? The city had a big need for that, and we request something like that. It's something similar to what we did to the property when Larry Myler showed up right here, right? He says, I'm going to do some single families on the back, and I'm going to bring some sales tax uses to the front. In reality, this zone is commercial. And in commercial, you can do services. You can do offices. You can do all this type of uses that do generate a type of tax, but not sales tax. Sales tax, it comes specifically from retail, from restaurants, and those type of uses. However, again, office uses are allowed in the zone, but then we cap it and we say 50-50 at least, right? So again, we create an amount of rules trying to get some restaurants, trying to get some small retail uses and stuff like that. First, and I think the way it was posted, it was, this is the E is the first one. Okay, so Another thing that we put in the code was that storage uses are specifically not allowed in the zone, in the cell stacks. We have had a couple of storage units come to you guys, and then the answer is, hey, we already have it in the code that that's a use that is not just not allowed, but it's specifically forbidden. For some reason, we were running away from those type of uses. It's listed as, usually when you have a zone, you have permitted uses, conditional uses, and that's it. And a list that is not used, a use that is not listed, backwards, is not permitted. But in this case, in this zone, we have permitted uses, conditional uses, and forbidden uses. And we talk about storage, we talk about car washes not to be allowed in the zone. So we had a vision of how we wanted to develop. Now, storage for every retail is needed. For a restaurant, you need some storage, okay? Now, it's important to say, how does the staff calculate the square footage that will be allocated toward this 25,000 requirement? If I have a restaurant, any given restaurant, and the square footage of a restaurant is 5,000 square feet, and out of those 5,000 square feet, 1,500 is for storage, that counts toward the 5,000. We counted it. We say, hey, the total area for this is 5,000 square feet. It counts toward this requirement, okay? But we keep the 1,500 incidental, very incidental, not just less than 50%, but very small, to the minimum. And in this case, the language that was drafted was to require 1,500, is to allow a maximum of 1,500 square feet. This that is scratched, that's how the code is right now. The proposed change is to eliminate that and exchange it with this language. Again, the existing language says storage use within any of the units is only permitted as incidental use and is limited to 1,500 square feet. What the applicant wants to do, as how the language reads, is that storage use within any of the units qualifies as cell stacks generating use. And the limit is lifted from 1,500 to 6,000 square feet. Okay. In this case, there may be, this is the language just proposed by the applicant, right? In this case, and how the language is written and how some rules apply right here with the 50-50, sorry, let me get this a little. Right here with the 50% office and 50% retail, only one building that is 12,000 square feet, 12,000, no 1,200, but 12,000 square feet, according to this code, can have half of the building, 6,000 storage, 3,000 office, 3,000 retail, and all should count toward retail. Then making the 25,000 almost half of it, not there, but almost half of it. This is what the applicant is proposing. Staff, the recommendation of staff is to keep the language as it is. Or if the Planning Commission decides to make some changes, it's a good time to discuss it, to talk it to the applicant. There's no public, but I mean, it's time to open the discussion. So that's change number one. Change number two is to eliminate a commercial-only buffer that was created for this zone. Again, when we were working on this, there was the idea that an apartment complex building was going to be right here, and the main floor was going to be commercial. And by doing that, the parking on the front was going to be dedicated for that commercial uses. And then we created a 64 buffer, because that allows for parking on both sides and a driveway in the middle that had to be used for commercial uses only, the drive and the parking spot. The applicant is proposing to change that, allowing some parking for the residential units along the boulevard. So it's the elimination of the buffer, and I think the applicant is proposing to still have the building or the apartment complex give us the 64 setback, but eliminate the buffer for parking and drive aisles. So in other words, parking and drive aisles for residential can be located along the boulevard. It's the same recommendation from the staff is to keep it as it is, but this is the proposal from the applicant, and he has his reasons to propose these amendments. That's what I have, Chair and Commissioners.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Are there any questions for Daniel? Okay, seeing none, we will ask the applicant if he wants to come
Did I
up.
explain it that good?
Yeah, great.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Do you have the thing in case we please say yes?
Yeah, if I need it.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? It's good to see you again.
Welcome back.
So, yeah, Daniel did a really good job describing what it is that we're asking for. With a couple I've got a couple caveats, I guess. So, starting with the first one as it relates to the I call it flex space, I guess, or storage. Yes, right there, E. So the way that we're dealing with language, and what we're trying to do is take an idea and put it into language in a way that fits what it is that we're trying to accomplish. We may have done a terrible job doing that, and if we have, we're open to changes in how that gets done. Basically, what we're trying to accomplish is we have. We've got that one issue, and I'll set that one aside for a second. Then the other one is with regards to the parking along Pleasant Grove Boulevard. So the intent behind that was, like Daniel said, there were two things really that were in my recollection, and like Daniel mentioned, we labored through all of this. You guys remember, was one of the important things was maintaining the amount of retail there, right? It was 25,000 square feet of retail that we settled on that we needed to maintain. We aren't in any way trying to diminish that. And we're not suggesting by virtue of pulling the parking forward that we are going to diminish any part of the retail at all. What has happened in the course of taking the site plan, like Daniel said, going through it and developing it, is that things just by nature move around. One of the big things that has changed is COVID has changed things, frankly. And so the nature of how retail is being done is different. The restaurants that we have a list of restaurants that we plan on bringing in, and then that are sit-down restaurants, and then we have others that are fast casual restaurants, right? The fast casual stuff is all but demanding drive-through aisles. And so it is just the direction that those are going. And we are not going for fast food. We're not going for McDonald's. We're not going for even a Chick-fil-A or an In-N-Out burger or anything like that, although that would be wonderful. But the fast casual stuff is, whether it's a Cubby's, a Costa Vida, or a Cafe Rio, or a Zupa's, or any one of those type of restaurants, prior to the pandemic, having a drive-through upped their retail sales by like 20%. Post-pandemic, or in the middle of the pandemic, it's like a 40% bump on their revenue. And so each one of these people are demanding they have it. So that has changed things in one way, right? It's just the nature of retail has changed a little bit. But let me get to what it is that we're trying to do. So going back to the storage. On the storage component, we're not asking that it be, this is not like, we're not looking for a warehouse or anything like that. In fact, probably the best example would be Interior Concepts. Have you guys ever been in the Interior Concepts building before? The one that's right by our site? Not inside, just seeing the outside. Yeah, so I think that they've done a really, really nice job. Jackie's done a great job. In fact, she sold us like about an acre next to her, but if you were to go into Jackie's place, she sells a ton of stuff out of there, right? Like it is a retail store, not in the sense that she's selling furniture, although maybe she does, but she operates her business out of there, and it's a combination of retail and also office. But if you were to go in the back, she has all sorts of stuff that she keeps back there, whether it's chairs or furniture or samples, whether it's the boards that you look at for cabinetry or carpet or any one of those things, she keeps back in that storage. That's in effect what it is that we're trying to allow here, is to say we have a user that would like to come in. They want to bring in, they'll have roughly 6,000 square feet of retail space. They're going to have roughly 6,000 square feet of storage space. And it's just the type of use that they are. Then on the second story, they want to put in an additional 6,000 square feet of office on the second story. So it is very much like an interior concepts type of building, although there is a more true retail component where that is going to be not only their retail sales, but it's also going to be other stores that will come along in with it. But everything that they store, they sell out of their storage stuff. So it basically is storing the equipment, the type of things that they're going to be selling to a consumer. So when we look at that, we're like, well, that is true retail. I mean, it's just all of this. It's retail in any other way that anything else is retail. They just to be honest, when I went through this, that was not even a thing that I even considered, that 1,500 square foot deal. I know that it's in there. It was a component that I never even thought of. We just assumed, we were thinking, food in my mind, and I was just not considering how much back of house you would need for something like that. So I tried to limit the language to say it can't be more than 6,000 square feet. It's the exact amount of space that this group needs. And I also tried to say it can't be more than 50% of the total use of the total building itself. So I was trying to, in a way, funnel this thing down to where I'm not looking for some broad approval that's going to dramatically change anything that we talked about before. We're just trying to allow a very good tenant that's going to, frankly, have a lot of retail sales out of their store to be able to also store the stuff that they are selling. Does that make sense? So that's the one as it relates to that. And if there's anything that you guys need to see in terms of building or the layout and stuff like that, we can absolutely provide that. And then the other thing as it relates to the parking. So what has happened as we've laid everything out is that, so again, the way that the intent behind why it was written this way was that we want to protect the front of this to be able to we want to protect the 25,000 square feet of retail that we have. And we're pulling the retail out to the front, which is frankly where it needs to be. As we've gone through this, it is clear that the best retail locations for the site are on the hard corners, right? What we've done by putting that road in, you can pause there. By putting 100 South in, we've literally created 3 hard corners. One on the east side of 100 South, one on the west side of 100 South, and then we've got that hard corner at Proctor and Pleasant Grove Boulevard. And what's happened is by concentrating retail, we've got retail on each one of those pads, and then we have another retail, and then we have other retail that goes along Pleasant Grove Boulevard. But this is where the intent is still being met. It's just, it's the fault of language, right? It's like you write something into a code that you're trying to accomplish a thing, but sometimes the language doesn't always accomplish the thing. So, for example, the parking says that that 65 feet off Pleasant Grove Boulevard has to be reserved for commercial parking. Well, what we're doing is we're actually taking the parking because it works better around these buildings to move it up up Proctor Lane and up 100 South, meaning we are out of that 65-foot buffer with more retail parking moving up the site and not necessarily always linear all the way along the front of the site. Does that make sense? You follow what I'm saying there? Not really. Not really.
There's a laser
I'm
right
following
there
you,
that
but
you can use.
but
What's that? Meaning, I guess what I'm saying is this, is that we're not losing any retail, we're just reorienting the parking. That's it. That's it. And so all we're doing is we're saying where we would normally have residential parking here and retail parking all along the front, we're having retail parking that moves back up here, and some of the residential parking comes down here, and some of this retail parking moves up here, and some of the residential parking moves down here. We're not sacrificing a single thing. That's why it says as long as C and D are met, which is you have to have 25,000 square feet of retail. It still has to be, X amount of it has to be cash, whatever, sales tax generating. None of that is being sacrificed. It's just moving the parking around in order to help it accommodate the retail. And so instead of walking a mile down the middle of all the way down Pleasant Grove Boulevard, which effectively would be, I don't know, 100 yards away from from where the retail is located, we're concentrating the parking around the retail and just moving it around. So does that make sense?
McKay, so what you're trying to say is you're moving the retail off Pleasant Grove Boulevard?
No, it's still on Pleasant Grove Boulevard.
But then you want to park further away from Pleasant Grove Boulevard?
No. What I'm saying.
Because I'm sorry, but that's what you just kind of said to me,
example.
is that you wanted to move it back up to the top, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, let me show you an example.
Anybody have crayons and a napkin?
I've got something that I can show you here. And again, this is extremely static. It doesn't show any of the it's going to look really boring. It's just a site plan, and so.
See, the problem is though, you're asking for a code amendment, right?
Yes.
But
PG retail tax amendment.
a code amendment allows all sorts of things to change.
And that's
correct?
why.
And so you've been here a couple times, obviously, already. So what would stop that from changing again?
Well, what we're trying to, that's a great question. And you just kind of have to try to address these, I guess, on a case-by-case basis. I'm not trying to take or change the overall intent and what it is that we are delivering. We are not delivering anything less here.
But one of the things that you're asking about is you're talking about changing the amount of storage based off a specific business, which you can't guarantee that would be there, can be there, might be there in 10 years from now. But then we're changing the whole thing for that.
For this one specific tenant that's coming in.
Yeah, well, that's what you're talking about for
Yeah.
that specific tenant, right?
You're right. Yeah, we are.
And
asking-
even using your concept design, you describe that though as that's a showroom. If she's in there showing product, that's a showroom, right? Which would be part of a retail section.
Mm-hmm.
That's way different than a storage area.
Well, she has both, actually.
I understand
She's
that,
got
but
both.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I
so the problem that we always have is we have to look at not just the specific person, right? Or the specific potential tenant. It's what it changes in the whole property of what it can become. Not just today, but 10 years from now, 20
Sure.
years from now. Even
and
when
I
you
get-
might not own the property anymore. Right?
I get that. And maybe, let me try to answer that on a couple different levels. Number one is they're going to be selling all of the things that they're storing. So, right, so basically the volume that goes out, they take this stuff and they sell it all over
It's
the
just hard
United
for us to consider a tenant.
Granted,
right?
Granted.
Like
I
we really
get
shouldn't
that.
consider a tenant
Well, no,
because it's
because-
really about the use.
And the text
Right.
amendment changes it.
Right.
Right, so the text amendment will
Exponentially.
change it just specifically for this piece of property, not for anything outside of it.
Okay.
And right, so this is just for the boulevard overlay, not the code for the entire city or anywhere else outside of this location here. So, and then we are developing 99% of this stuff. And so as we develop it, we're just trying to, again, not take anything away here. And I understand what you're saying, Tim, I really do. And that's why I'm saying, if there's a way where this can be written, where we can accomplish that, we are happy to do it. I'm not trying to deceive the city in doing something different than what it is that we're proposing here. And in fact, if we wanted to just say, we're gonna run this plat with it, so there's a plat that goes with it, we're happy to do that. Meaning, here's the plat, it applies to this plat, and that's it. Do you know what I'm saying? And just tie it specifically to that. We're totally happy to do that. I don't even need it to apply anywhere else on the site, with the exception of that one little purple section. So this is the overall site, and it shows how things are kind of broken down. Daniel, would you mind going to the next slide? So what we're looking at here, this is a close-up on, and again, it's static and it's really hard to get an idea of what this will look like. But Pad 1 is 5,000 square feet, okay? Pad 2, the purple one, you have 6,000 square feet of retail. That's the stuff that kind of wraps around the building. The storage component of it will be basically just kind of kept in the back. And then the structure that's on the front is actually a 2-story structure with this kind of cool little tower element. And the second story of that is office. And so they basically have their offices on the second floor, the retail on the ground floor, and then their storage is kept hidden back behind there. This is the group that basically we're trying to accommodate there. Now you can see, now in the yellow, these are the apartments. It's broken down into 2 phases, and it's really, really difficult to try to make out what that even looks like. But from you will not see any of the parking that you see in the back where it says 193 apartments. None of that will even be seen. Those apartments go like this, and they completely shield all of that. So the only thing that you'll see are the retail pads, that retail/office building in purple, and then the retail pad 1 out in front. Pad number 3, we've got 2 restaurants that have verbally committed to us. They're really good. They're sit-down restaurants. We've got a drive-through in there, but we think that those 2 are going to be sit-down restaurants. Pad number 1 is going to be a combination of fast casual, okay? And then we've got the actual retail on on Pad 2, which will be a combination of not only their retail, but other retail that we'll bring in there with it. And then the apartments so from a scale standpoint, you're going to go 1 story with the retail pads, 1.5. It'll look 1.5 because we've got to have 15-foot clear heights like this and higher. And then it'll climb up to a 2. That purple building is 2 stories, and then the yellow stuff behind it is like 4. And then it's a podium. Basically, that stuff over there has a podium, and so you park underneath it. And it'll look, I think the way that it presents is going to present in a really beautiful way. I think it's going to look dynamite.
So again, the problem that we have is, and it's not intentional, but it can come across as a bait and switch, right? As you present something, it doesn't come out that way. And so we have to be really wary of that. And no doubt that you're going to build something beautiful. I think we're trusting you to do that.
Right.
But this parking right here, is this directly accessing then? Are you going to have access to these buildings on this side of the parking here?
I have one of these. This is fantastic. Okay, yes. So to answer your question, Todd, here's what I was referring to. Here's the 65-foot buffer all through here. I can't have any residential parking from here.
Right, understood. But what I'm asking is, are you having, so then they'll park here and it'll be direct access to this building from this side?
That's right.
Will they also have access from this side where it's retail parking?
Sorry, who? The residents?
The residents.
Yes. But over here, we'll end up putting clubhouse, and we're going to make all of this right in through here on the ground floor feel like it's a gym, feel like it's the Post, feel like it's a clubhouse. And so it'll have a retail vibe to it.
And I think that's, again, in concept, I think that's fine. But I don't know that I can take that into much consideration right now. The problem that I have is, well, what if this was as written reserved for commercial? What would that change as far as your access to these buildings and what they look like?
So let me get to that. So here is my buffer, 65 feet. It goes right to the edge of these stalls right there, okay? If I wanted to adhere to the code, I would have retail in through here. None of this would be retail. None of this would be retail. And none of that would be retail. None of it. It'd all be residential. If I wanted to strictly adhere to the code, right? And I'd have retail lining through here, which, by the way, is not a great, it's kind of a difficult configuration because it would just all be in line. But I could do that. I could get rid of all of that parking, get rid of all of this parking in retail, and get rid of all that parking. If I just wanted to strictly adhere to the code, that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes the code is written in such a way where we're trying to accomplish something, we just don't completely get there until it's fully evolved. What I'm saying is, what difference does it make if I pull the retail up here because the parking up here, because it works, and the parking up here because that works, and pull the residential visitor parking out in front here, where it's not fighting with any one of these things, and it's allowing for this retail to actually, Of course I want to have the parking around that pad, and of course we want to have the parking around that pad. I don't want to build a pad like this and stretch them all the way out into no man's land. No one's going to park here and go there. It's too far. Does that make sense, Todd?
Does that need to have that, all that parking for the 193 units? Is that why you
It
need that
does.
to all be?
It does. I'm just trying to meet code. I'm trying to meet parking code for every single one of these pads. Now, if, again, you could take all this parking and all this parking and all this parking and substitute it here. I've got enough. And then turn that into residential parking and that into residential parking, and then I'll never be able to lease my retail. I won't be able to lease it. They'll be like, what the heck, Mac?
So where are you saying that the retail would be then?
It wouldn't be. That's my point. It
You're
wouldn't-
saying there would be no retail there, is what you're saying?
I'm saying it wouldn't be viable retail. I'm not suggesting I'm doing that, Tim, at all. I don't want to do that.
I'm just trying to understand.
What I'm trying to convey is that the way retail works is they look at this road, the moment that it goes in, this becomes a hard corner, that becomes a hard corner, and this is a hard corner. The retailers are like, gimme, 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 gimme. They just want to be on a hard corner where there is a stoplight because they want to turn in, get their stuff, be able to park immediately, have all of the visibility, all of the signage, the ease of access, and the ease to get out, and all the parking around them. If I don't do that, I'll never get them. I can't bring them if I don't help meet what it is that they're looking for. So if I were to say, let's rotate this building sideways, and let's rotate these buildings down here sideways, and let's just park all the way down here, and rotate this building sideways, and park all the way down here, I'm creating this no man's land of parking, and it makes none of this stuff viable anymore. And even if it were, which it's not, I don't understand the logic behind saying that is what the difference is. I don't understand the logic behind what the difference is if we're just putting residential parking here and the retail parking back in through here around the actual buildings themselves. That's all I'm trying to get to. I'm not trying to do a bait and switch, and I'm asking that we write this in such a way where it doesn't allow me to do a bait and switch. And the way that I tried to do that was to say that we are allowed to have residential parking up here only if you meet C and D. And C and D says you have to have 25,000 square feet of retail and you have to have X amount of retail be retail sales. So what I'm trying to say is we are not compromising anything that we said that we would provide. We're just trying to design this in such a way where it's, it works and it meets the market.
I agree with that statement for the one condition about parking. But the condition about storage, I think there is a potential that we're changing things. But I think your points here about the hard corners and the need to keep the commercial parking near the proximity of the unit that's on the hard corner, I think makes a lot of sense. From a practical standpoint, I think it needs to be that way.
And there's obvious, like you've mentioned, and we're concerned about it, is the language.
Mm-hmm.
It's the language that we need to shore up to protect the city and to protect you. And so we're trying to get on the same page here. And we're not against, it's not us versus you. It's just we need to come to a consensus and you understand our concerns.
Completely.
We're trying to see what you're trying to do and get here, especially since things have changed, obviously, since the last time that we sat down face to face and saw this. It makes sense, like Dustin said, the hard corners, that makes sense if it's retail. And things have changed since the pandemic. And so there's some adjustments. It is just for this area, this overlay zone. It's not for the rest of it. So we need to shore up the language. And if that means we need to have more time to shore up the language that is feasible for us, feasible for him, that's the direction that we need to go.
Yeah, McKay, that's my concern is when you come up and say that the intent of this change is to really, it's a relocate parking.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I read that is that you're trying to get more fulfill your residential parking requirements by using commercial parking spaces. That's exactly how it reads to me.
Well-
I would never have guessed this had anything to do with location or anything. It just looks like a way to try to
Yeah.
get more
And
residential
I
parking
apologize
without
if I wrote that
paying.
wrong.
Well, so that's what, and I think that's what Commissioner Jeff is saying. I can never remember your last name.
First
Butler,
down
I
job.
can see the name tag.
That's the hardest thing about
I
being
know.
chair, even though you've known it
Forgive
for
me.
20 years.
I need a cheat sheet. Okay, but I just, the language does not
Yeah.
reflect that, and I don't know, so I kind of do feel like there's been a bait and switch. It's like a way to get more residential parking and meet that requirement with paying less. Because I think at one time we talked about maybe underground parking, something like that, a structure
Well,
that
we-
would allow that.
We were taught, it wasn't not, I don't remember it being underground, but it's a podium. This is also a podium. Meaning, when I say podium, meaning you're coming in at grade, and then there's a PT, like a concrete slab that goes out over the top of it, and then you stack. And so that's why you can see it's thin on the front end, because that's a single loaded corridor. You don't want to see the parking, obviously. We want to see the cute front of, some little browns, like walk-up units or whatever, and then it goes out over the top of it for the backside. So
But you do realize, based on this design, which is completely, we can't really take into consideration, to
I
be
get it.
honest. We're gonna see, all we're gonna see is parking. Like, that's gonna be the whole front
Well, no,
side of.
you won't, so the buildings, all that, and we've really designed it this way where the building comes all the way across here, so you don't see any of this. And it,
Everything in front of it.
oh, yeah.
It's all the parking in
But
the
that's,
front.
But that's
it's
what the
a,
code is now anyway.
but that is, that's the nature of retail, right? I mean, anytime you go and in fact, that's the way the code is written right now, is that this has to be parking, all of
That's
this.
not different at all, because it would have been just commercial parking instead of residential parking, put in the same spot.
Yeah,
And-
it does not like that. I mean, it can be parking, it can be a building, it can be anything, not just parking.
Right.
But but
But with the number of required spaces.
We actually have developments in the city that have the retail right along that
Mhm.
front, so I know that that is an option.
And Bobby, I apologize if the language that was written was written poorly. Like, that's on me. I just want to convey to you, I'm genuinely not trying to do that at all. In fact, it's the opposite. I understand. I mean, we have certain things that we're trying to meet here in order to make it viable for the restaurants and the other tenants that are coming on in. But I completely recognize what it is that I represented to the city and what it is that we have. You guys have been wonderful to work with. I just want to continue to have some type of cooperative dialogue where we say, okay, you understand what our intent is. I want to understand I understand what your intent is, but let's talk with each other and see if we can create this in such a way where we're accomplishing both. Because even if again, it's just a function of allocation. I'm not taking retail parking away. I can park our retail. I'm totally parking it. It's just how it gets arranged around these buildings that is important to our tenants, our retailers. And so by moving our parking back up in through here, I literally am taking parking away from the residential that would otherwise be back up in here and back up in here.
I'm not concerned about you being able to park your retail. I think I'm more concerned about you being able to park your residential. It sounds like that may be the issue, and that's why you're like trying
No.
to use that parking.
Well, I've got to park both.
Right.
Meaning, I've got 25,000 square feet of retail I have to park, and I have 193 units that I need to park. On the site, I can adequately park both. What I need to, all it is just, it's moving the little pieces like a puzzle to make sure that they all fit in the right spot. That's it. And so when I move the parking, when I have enough parking for all of this to make all of it work, which I do, and then we move the parking back up here away from that 65-foot buffer, I'm needing to take that and place it back up in here. But it makes sense if you look at it this way, Bobby Joe. If you look at it, if this is an anchor here for your retail, which this is just where they want to be, and they just want to be here. That's just the nature of the business. And this guy here, this is no man's land. It really is no man's land from a parking standpoint. I'm not going to get anybody to park here and walk all the way down to these pads, for restaurants. It's just going to be
Well,
difficult.
if they're good restaurants, then they will park, right?
If it's the Cheesecake Factory, they'll just be
Sure,
there.
yeah, people will walk far for a good restaurant.
So again, it's just an allocation. It's where we're allocating them. I'm not trying to take anything away from the retail. And if we need to write it in such a way where it's better and cleaner, I will. I'm just trying to move the pieces around, that's all.
I kind of think the consensus is that that's the biggest problem at the moment. The language is bad.
So going to what Commissioner Phillips talked about with the storage, so understanding that 1,500 square feet for the storage, that is, correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm asking you the question. If it's 1,500 square feet, then you are limited as a developer on the retail that can come in. Because let's say that we do have, and it's not just this one developer or one business that you're talking about, it's other businesses, and they need more, but we're limiting it to 1,500. If we were to provide some flexibility within the verbiage where you understand that we, as the city, we want to be able to, if this business goes out of business, if they leave, it gives the city, gives us confirmation that whatever comes in there is going to be a viable solution, provide retail tax to us. And so if am I understanding that correctly?
That's right. And my offer to even run this, like if we were to plat this and just run the text amendment with this plat and say it only applies to this plat, I would be happy with that. Meaning if it doesn't apply to the other ones, we can say that. You know, we're just trying to, what you said is exactly right, Jeffrey. It's limiting the amount, it's limiting the type of retail that we can bring in. And from a sheer tax dollar perspective, it would actually be a really, really good thing for the city because they sell a boatload of stuff all throughout the country from this little place, right?
Daniel, can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
This for Daniel. As far as because my understanding of your intent is the office space that you're allocating in this building is intended to be used by the tenant that is coming in, right? It's their office space.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, in our regular discussion about retail and having storage that's incidental to the retail, could we say the same thing about the office? I mean, if that office space is incidental and because a lot of retail places have office space too, does that make a difference?
No.
Because
No,
if
if you
the
actually
office-
take a look at that building and what he's proposing, he's counting the 12,000 square feet of that building as retail office. So it's 12,000 right there, just on that building.
But if the office that's part of the same tenant is still part of the retail business that's generating the sales tax revenue, it's just the office space for the retail business, isn't that still retail?
No, because we don't have that in any other zone. We don't have a sales tax requirement an area. It was just created for this, right? So we don't have it somewhere else. I think the only area that we did it again was for Larry Myler, and then we'd have it on the interchange of district, but that interchange of district does not allow for residential at all. So it's something that we only apply to this right here. Again, the intent was to bring hardcore 25,000 square feet of retail, right? In this case, as how I'm seeing it right here, he's proposing to have that 6,000, but count that toward the retail part of it. And again, it's based on the design or the current needs of the developer, right? Because I've been listening to this, and it's like, what difference does it make? Well, it makes a big difference in regards to the parking because the previous idea was to bring the commercial to the front. This building was different, right? So as the idea is changing, of course there need to be changes. The building was different, it was located differently as how this one is. That's why the code was written that way. Because the code was written trying to tailor the idea that we had around that time. As how ideas change, that's why the code is proposed to be changed. So because the design of the building now is different, because the location of the buildings are different, that's why it has to change. because the uses are different. But again, just to answer that question, I mean, we can write anything we want. We can say, hey, office doesn't count or office does want. I mean, this is a new thing for all of us. And we pretty much, we tailor this whole ordinance. This ordinance didn't exist. This zone didn't exist. These rules didn't exist. We just applied them to this overlay.
I guess
So can we write whatever we want? Yeah, for sure. We can take
I guess
any.
the point of my question is if it's a retail business, they, as a prudent business owner, are going to tailor the inside of their 12,000 square feet to maximize their ability to produce business, to sell whatever they're selling. And if we're thinking they're going to sublease to an insurance agent who's not going to generate sales tax, then I guess maybe that's the concern. But if this is truly a retail business and the retail business is occupying 100% of that building, it would be inefficient.
Well, but, sorry, I interrupted.
No,
Go ahead.
it's okay.
I do that too much, sorry.
Oh, yeah, you do that a lot.
I do.
I just, I tend to allow the business owner, I guess, in my thought, to do what's best for the business. And if it's within the concept of the code is to have retail there, and it's retail there. I mean, I own a retail space, or I guess I lease retail space in Orem on State Street, and I have a office that's in the retail, and I have a back room that's a break room, and most retail places have to have a place for their workers to go have lunch. Are we gonna criticize them and say, oh, you've got too much space for a break room, so you've got to cut out the soda machine that's a perk for your employees? I mean, how detailed do we need to get into exactly how the space is configured within a retail building?
Yeah, I think if we go to the genesis of this, I mean, we can tailor it any way we want to, right? We can put any conditions, write it in any way you guys tell me, and I'll find a way. But this zone, could have we done this without having to rezone it? Without having to do the overlay? Yes, for sure. This is the the commercial sales sub-district, okay? At the end, can someone could have come and put an office right there with another, in other words, interior concepts didn't have to rezone to be right there because the zone already allowed for something like that. But we allow a lot of residential, a lot of it. And we also reduced the parking requirements for this. I don't know if you guys remember that too. But we did it like that because, again, the idea was multiple restaurants. And if we think about it, what gives more sales tax? A McDonald's or interior concepts?
Well, it depends, that
You're making
completely
a huge
depends
no,
on
no,
the
no.
restaurant and the.
Sure, but I'm just giving a comparison, right? But there's no comparison whatsoever, right?
I don't
So
know, you're making
that
a
was
huge
the
assumption.
that was the idea again. But can we write anything? Yeah, sure. We created this out of nowhere. Can we change it? For
Daniel,
sure.
The only thing, I understand where you're coming from. The only thing I'm saying is we're not proposing to take any of that away. I'm not proposing to take any of.
But you are, right?
Wow.
So, because you're counting 6,000 feet of storage as retail space. And
Well,
so
even if-
you're cutting 25,000 down to
Well, if there's,
19,000.
I guess so,
Now, internet businesses don't work like that. They don't pay sales tax to us based on their sales in other states. I own one, a very unsuccessful one. But when I sell to other states, if I have enough sales to qualify, I pay sales tax to those states. If I sell inside Utah, then I pay sales tax to Pleasant Grove or to the state that goes to Pleasant Grove, only for my sales in Utah. Okay, so if that business there sells $1 million a year to Colorado, we get none of that sales tax. Colorado gets that sales tax. None of that comes to Pleasant Grove.
yeah.
Okay, so that's where the difference is that you're proposing to reduce the amount of sales tax generating use that would primarily go to us by, 25%. Okay, and so we're going from
Well,
under
not-
the existing, you have 25,000 square feet, and, with that 1,500 per unit, you're gonna devote about 6,000 square feet to storage. And then you're adding another 6,000 on top of that. And so suddenly, there's actually only 12,000 square feet of sales tax generating use. So it's not just that it's retail, it's that, and basically, like Daniel was saying, this is the trade-off that we're making, right? Our experience is that residential is easy, right? If we wanted to, we could have the rest of Pleasant Grove covered in residential buildings in a year, you know, if we permitted that. Offices are a little bit harder, but also still not as hard. Retail is really hard to get. And so we make a trade. We say, okay, we understand this is a weird shaped lot, that it's deep, that there are differences to it, we'll trade you. We'll let you put in residential, and a lot of residential here, and in exchange you provide this square footage, right? And so I don't care about the parking, because honestly, you could draw on your site plan your parking lines to show all of that as commercial and never let anyone park that way. And it would be fine, you know, and we see plats like that relatively often where the parking has weird lines through the parking lots that are assigned to different buildings and whatever. But the storage bothers me because that really is dropping the potential for, and there's no guarantee that they'll be successful or whatever, but
Sure.
I think there might be ways that we could work around that. You know, you already have, for example, that extra office space on the second floor, and that's great, you know, that's extra space and it doesn't count, you know, the stuff underneath counts for the retail and
Yeah.
things. But, and I know you can't put a warehouse, or it would be awkward to put a warehouse on the second floor, the storage, but,
And that's
that's the difference to me,
And
right?
that's a fair, and that's fair. You know, the only thing maybe that I think it's a fair criticism, I'm not trying to, you know, but when we go back to the text amendment, and again, maybe this was an error on my part. I actually sat down with Daniel when we were going through we were going through the site plan and getting it ready to the point where you can turn it in, and Daniel said, well, of the 25, my understanding was that the 25, that we were required to have 25,000 square feet, and of that, 50% of it was required to be retail generating or retail sales. Daniel came back and said, no, it's all 25,000 square feet. And it's been a little bit of a bone of contention because that was never my understanding, and I think you could sort of maybe read into it that that's the way that it's supposed to be, but that was never my understanding. And so, because my understanding was always that we were going to have some component of office mixed in with this that that was commercial, but wasn't retail sales generating. And so that kind of threw me a bit for a loop. But we haven't come in and said, "Hey, we're going to fight you on that." Like, we're trying to still work within that framework. And maybe the only thing I would say to that is that, like in a restaurant, you have to have back of house in order to sell your food. You know, these guys need to have back of house in order to sell their product. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a fair thing to say, Peter, I really do. And I'm not trying to, again, taking that into consideration, how do we get there? Like, I think
Right.
even given that, we probably, if we're at 6 in the retail, plus 5, plus 7, plus, you know, I think that there's probably ways I know I can get to at least 20 if we don't count that 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. And so I know that we're within but then we're actually adding, that's why in my mind when I was thinking it was 25,000 square feet of commercial, we're actually adding office on top of that. So at the end of the day, we end up with closer to 30,000 square feet total, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we're within a fairly close margin of error. It's just a function of doing this in a way where you guys are happy. I don't want you guys to be unhappy with this, honestly. We want you to be able to be like, this is great. We love what you guys are doing, and want to work with you to try to get there.
Okay, thanks, McKay. Does anyone else have any questions for McKay? No, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, seeing as this is a public hearing, we will open it up for any public comment.
Hiding in the
Seeing there is no public comment, we will bring it back up here for discussion. Do any of you have anything. Daniel, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, in regards to the 25,000, I think that was an item that if we listened also to the minutes, we discussed heavily that during the planning commission, the multiple meetings that we have, whether the interpretation by the applicant was different. I think we discussed it multiple times in here, and that was the main point. And just as a reference, we, for a piece of land that we had on State Street, we require about 20,000 for about 100 units. We only went 5,000 more for almost triple the units, just to give us an idea on something that already allowed residential, and we did something here that didn't allow for residential. Now, the way we did it on the other side was by a development agreement. In here, we put it on the code. We didn't go to a development agreement because we learned the lesson. But it's that's just to give us an idea of the difference of these two and how we got to that 25,000. The other one was developed first, and we, for 120 units, something like that, of single-family dwellings, and we require at least 20,000 square feet of retail uses, sales tax generating uses. In this case, we're going to 260 units, and we only increase it by 5,000, just to give us an idea.
Daniel, could I ask a clarification question? I think it's come up a couple of times. What counts as storage? So if I have a restaurant, am I understanding right? So the kitchen wouldn't be storage, right? That's part of the retail generating use. A break room wouldn't be storage either. It would be specifically like the walk-in freezer and the actual area where I'm storing things.
Yeah.
So, I think that if you have a 5,000 square foot restaurant, your dining room and counter and things are not going to be the majority of it even. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, that's one. Another thing that I totally understand. If the need for more storage is needed, I think we can increase it for an office use or something like that, but do not count out towards retail. At least that's the recommendation from staff. I mean, I understand that some business need more, and because a lot of those is shipped out of state. But we have this requirement. I think it all boils down to the 25,000 square feet that we require, that we kind of like trade off to allow residential in here. If the storage is needed, for sure we can change that. It's just how the proposal is written. Again, it's the staff recommendation. You guys get to discuss it. It's not to count toward the retail requirement of 25,000.
Okay, thank you. I think the best way to do this is to split the discussion between the two items. So let's first talk about the storage amendment. Anyone have any comments on that? I think our options would be to we either stay firm on the 25,000, or we accommodate possibly just in that one pad area, but then recognizing that would reduce the number of feet that we originally agreed upon. So what do you guys think?
So I understand what Peter's saying as far as a lot of it does get shipped out of state. We don't see that sales tax, but at the same time of running a business, you have to have the space to store your inventory. And I don't see why we wouldn't count that as part of a retail generating use.
To that point, in your question, Peter, you didn't mention what I would call showroom space. Would showroom space, or does that count as storage, or does that count as part of the retail?
But even then, if you have a 6,000 square foot office / showroom space, your items are bigger. A lot of times a 6,000 square foot warehouse may be warranted.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it should be punishing to the business to say that doesn't count towards your retail space, because it all is part of the sales tax generating business.
But I think it comes down to what's our objective here? Are we trying to encourage more retail? Because if we are, then we don't want to allow a business that size with that much storage, because it obviously diminishes the amount of retail businesses that we can have in that area.
I mean, some types of businesses would. Some types of businesses, it would be better.
Yeah, but mine is, to me, it's like when you've got a business that needs that much warehouse, like myself. They call me retail, but I have like 1,000 square foot showroom, 1,000 of office, and I've got 5,000 of storage. But it's really big. But I'm carrying a bigger product. It's not that I'm walking off the shelf right there. You know what I mean? And so I think the intent is more when you're walking into the store.
Well,
I
but
get
I
it
think,
changes, but that's what I'm saying is it depends on what the intent is there. Because to me, that's more of a warehouse kind of a business. Blackhurst Carpets.
maybe I'm
Right? It's a
misunderstanding
bigger
this,
place
but
to
isn't the intent to drive sales tax revenue for the
Yes,
city?
but what I'm saying is if it was not a business like myself, right? The retail, or what you'd consider retail, I mean, I'm using up more than 70% of my space is for storage,
And
right? If that was all individual retail businesses, that's different. But I also look at the strip mall that I own, and I've had people come in and out of there. Technically, it's supposed to be retail, but I've had insurance agents that don't pay any, right? And I've had just different kinds of businesses that they change every 3 to 5 years.
Well,
on
right,
average.
but we're saying it has to be retail. I would say that the code needs to be rewritten if the amendment goes through to have the storage be incidental to the retail use. But even then, in your business's example, would you not pay sales tax revenue to Linden, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, that's always the issue with us is because we technically make transactions in other cities. We pay it all through Linden.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. But I guess what I'm trying to say, Todd, is that depending on what it is, like if it is a restaurant, that's a completely different kind of a business and a different kind of a pad. And I'm not opposed to one to the other, but I do think that it does make a difference. If my whole strip mall that I owned was restaurants, that's totally different. Now, parking, ease of getting in and out of, those kind of things, what kind of it is, what kind of unit is going to determine the amount of rent you can get, the kind of building that it's going to be, and those kind of things. So it determines the look, and you want a place to be successful. You know, I think of some of the places I've been throughout the valley that the reason the retail struggles, honestly, is ease of getting in and out of, or it's a pain. I think when we think about, and I'm just throwing this stuff out there because I think this just needs to be rewritten totally. But if you try to go over there to any of those, I think all those retail businesses by the In-N-Out Burger and American Fork have been hurt by In-N-Out because it's a nightmare to get in and out of there because of how they consume that parking lot. Right? Now, can you determine that? Can you dictate that? Do we hurt the developer because of something like that? No, but I think the intent is at the end of the day, Pleasant Grove is super limited on how much sales tax it can generate. And if it's a bigger box store, then that's going to be different. It's like an R.C. Willey. You know, even the R.C. Willey here doesn't have as much storage because it comes from their place in Salt Lake. But when you're talking 6,000 square feet, that's a big space
Yeah.
of storage.
Well, that's my question. That's my question is, if we're trying to maximize sales tax generation, then wouldn't you maximize that by requiring more, like limiting?
showroom?
Limiting the number of square footage per retail.
And that's exactly what
And-
has happened, the 1,500. And that was
Well-
that was my concern, is just limiting the types of businesses that can come in, that want to come in. If we're limiting it to 1,500, that's not a lot of flexibility. Let's say that it is happens to be a high-end furniture shop, and it's custom-made furniture, and they come in and they have to have 3,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet. If we leave it at 1,500, they're not able to be there.
Well, I'm not.
We're saying, sorry.
I-
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
restaurant.
which I think that's kind of what we were trying to accomplish, is have smaller businesses like a restaurant but more of them. Do you
But
know
are-
what I mean? Because then we maximize the amount of sales tax.
Are we
that get.
forcing that though? Are we being able to determine that by a business license? Because the reality is, it just changes.
Yeah.
Like
That's my question.
even if you put that in there and he goes ahead and has 6,000 that's retail, 6,000 that's warehouse, and 6,000 that's office, I'm telling you, in 3 to 5 years, the whole thing could be retail in a certain way. It could be different unless you're going to walk in there and see how much it is, because the business is just going to adjust the best way it can.
And I don't know that having more spaces for retail means more sales tax revenue
That's
either.
what I'm asking. That's what I'm.
I think you can have a building that's 6,000 square feet showroom, 6,000 square feet warehouse that will beat out 2 or 3 smaller
Okay.
retail shops.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was trying to get at.
100%.
So what, I guess, would you guys be open to just allowing the change on this one pad? Would that satisfy everyone, or do you want to, would you, I mean, if you wanted to allow the change, assuming you wanted to allow some kind of flexibility, sticking with what was originally, was originally written on everything but this one pad?
If we're just going off of this design right here, there's actually less office space than what I remember was originally presented in theory. So there's actually more retail from what I recall.
Well, there's less retail, just
But less retail,
office
it is,
space,
it's not spread out throughout development as it was expected.
so is that something that we're open to considering, or?
I'm not a huge fan of that kind of zoning, like,
Yeah.
you know, we're already writing rules just for this property.
It will
and
be
so-
almost impossible just to put it just for that pad.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to do it. It will apply to the entire zone.
Double secret overlay.
I know, that's the thing. I guess, could you make it, could you apply it to a certain type of business? But then I guess that business could be incorporated in all of those.
See, and that's kind of
I
what,
think that's a problem for
that's
us.
what my concern is too. We can't do it to just
Yeah.
that pad. It has to be across the board for everything, and I think that just opens a door.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we're willing to do that at all, so then.
Well, because then if we do that, I mean, doesn't it give him the opportunity, and I'm not saying that that would be the case,
Yeah.
to put excessive amounts of storage on all
Yes.
of those retail pads?
Yes, that's what we're saying.
And
that's
I just
exactly-
I just don't think that's in our best interest.
Yeah. I agree.
And maybe you guys can help me get here, but I don't see the storage as non-retail generating.
Not always.
I think
The-
it would
the-
just depend on what's going in.
The reality is your rents and everything like that is what determines it, right? So if you're gonna be a business that's gonna be in a hypersensitive retail, higher rent area, right? That has a lot of traffic like that, you don't wanna pay the cost of the rent for there. You'll go somewhere that's off the beaten path. Does that make sense?
That was my point about letting the business make a decision of efficiency based on what are they gonna do for their business? How are they gonna use the space most effectively to help them be most successful in that space? You're 100% right. You're not gonna put your business that requires 5,000 or 80% of your space as concrete floored storage in a high shed building on high rent district. You're just not gonna do it.
You're gonna pay $1.35, you're not gonna pay $10.
Right.
That's basically what it is.
Right.
And if they do that, then you're the man. But that's really the reality, because they won't wanna be there.
No, and I
Yeah.
get it, because, I mean, it's like you said, those two hard corners should be prime location.
And they will be. They will be.
And so I'm not worried per se that we're gonna have a lot of storage on those two corners, because that would be crazy.
Well, you're not worried, but it could happen.
That's what I was
And
gonna
so
say.
are we okay, that we would have to be okay with that happening?
But when you leave a space that's like that, you can turn it into a net of the gymnastics center too.
And you're saying that's not sales tax generating?
No, it's not.
Only in the sense that the moms, while they're waiting to pick up their daughters, are spending money at the Sodalicious next door and generating sales tax.
There you go.
Right.
And is that a permitted use in the zone?
Okay,
See, it-
so,
I just think that this is open to so much speculation, it's just kind of hard to nail it down, because I get what everybody is saying. Yeah, you're right, there are businesses that do require a lot of storage that are still generating sales tax,
yeah.
but
I
we
agree.
can't control that.
I agree, Lisa. I just think, though, that opening that door opens us to a whole lot of, could open us up.
So by leaving it at 1,500, we're just requiring them to be restaurants.
so help me,
Really?
I'm
help
not
me
saying that we wanna leave it
understand.
at 1,500 either.
Can you guys help me understand what it is that what the risk is? I guess I'm not understanding the downside to allowing more storage if it's tied off to a generating use.
I think the idea,
Or
for
sales
me,
tax
the way I
generating,
understand it, is that if we do that, then you're allowing fewer retail opportunities, because there's, one business is using the majority of the space, so then you have less retail businesses in that space, right?
Not
And so-
just that, but you're also opening the door for shenanigans, you know, like.
Like
so
fence
he's-
companies?
Well, he's suggesting, for example, here that there would be multiple retail stores in that building, right? And so if I want to run a storage unit, kind of interior storage unit, and I have my 100 square foot front office where I sell boxes, so I'm generating retail, and then I have a 6,000 foot warehouse separated into lockers that I rent out, you know, that's...
But that wouldn't be incidental to the retail use that it has to be tied off to.
So it's the
I mean,
the verbiage.
We
It's the
can't,
verbiage.
we can't plan to have people break the code. I mean, we can't plan for that. If they're gonna break the law, they're gonna break the law. I mean, that's just unfortunately the fact of it.
What you've described, Peter, is actually that the retail is incidental to the storage, not.
Not the other way around.
The
And we're
other
saying
way
that
around,
that the storage has to be incidental to the retail.
Right, but we don't define incidental.
Yeah, that's the problem and I'm not saying McKay will do it, but developers usually take advantage of that. So if we don't define it really clear how it is, it will. Like, for example, we have a problem with open space, and we always lose on open space because developers interpret it, of course, the way they can maximize the number of units that they can have. So if we go on that route, we need to be very clear, because based on experience and for us, if something is not going to go right, for sure it's not going to go right. So we need to cover all of our bases. I think that's the recommendation from staff. If we're going to do it, let's cover all of our bases, all of our definitions, very clear on how exactly we want to do it.
Well, and I think it kind of goes back, I think Bobby Joe said it, that, you know, even if it ends up being fantastic with this developer, who's to say what happens down the road in the future?
Okay, so McKay, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, could you write into the text? I know that you couldn't like necessarily run it to the plat, but could you write into the text amendment that it says, you know, if it's what we tried to do is say that it's 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, and maybe 5,000, and honestly 5,000 square feet may be able to work for them. I've just been texting back and forth, but 5,000 square feet, and it's 50% of the total building, right? So it's obviously in that sense. I don't know if you could define it as incidental. I think that it is incidental to their business, but also say notwithstanding, it can only apply to one tenant within the project, right? Meaning only one tenant can have up to 5,000 square feet.
Man, that's opening us up pretty hard.
That's what?
I mean, that opens us up to some liability, because then how do you pick the tenant? Is the other tenant happy with that? I mean, I would rather apply something consistently across the entire area.
I'm trying to narrow it down. So.
No, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to like just throw down what you're saying.
That was the dumbest idea ever. Go sit down. Just kidding. Okay. I know.
That's not what I said.
Okay, don't put that in the minutes.
Good job on the first day,
Okay, so
Bobby
what
Joe.
do you guys want to do? Would you like to continue this so we can, so
Yeah.
that maybe Daniel and the applicant could come up with some better language, or do you guys feel prepared to propose something different?
I don't
or-
think there's any doubt that we've got to continue it.
Yeah.
Even the applicant has indicated, look, let's correct the language, let's make it more clear, let's make it more effective. But as long as Daniel and the applicant understand what our concerns are, then they have something to work with.
Okay.
So as long as we can define kind of what
Yeah.
our points
So,
of issue.
From what I understand, you guys are open to allowing this higher square footage of storage.
As long as it's incidental or directly related, maybe is a different word, to the retail.
And you're okay, obviously, that could be applied to any of the retail space within, I mean, because that's the way it's going to have to be.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, okay, good luck.
Directly correlated to the business.
Yeah, and again, just to be sure, I can work with the applicant, even if we don't see eye to eye, I can come out with a version, he's gonna come out with some version, and that's what we do, right? We present both versions. I'll try to do my best based on the recommendation that you guys provide. But again, I come out with mine, and we don't see eye to eye, and then we'll just bring two different versions of the code.
That sounds great. All right.
But by doing that, I told the applicant before that this will go to the city council on March 16. It won't happen like that. it may be in April or something like that.
Okay, yeah. All right, as
If
far
it's
as.
not ready to go, it's not ready to go.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
there's
We don't
nothing
want to
can
rush
do
it
to rush
through.
that.
Yeah. Okay, with respect to the second item, the parking, or the changes to the, I guess we're calling it parking and what?
The
And
buffer.
Buffer, yeah. It sounds like there's several that are okay with this amendment.
Probably clean up the language again, but the intent as it's presented there, I don't have a problem with.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to allow buildings, residential buildings, or, you know, those kinds of things within the, so I don't have a problem with the parking, is what I'm saying, Daniel, but I would have an issue if you wanted to bump those
Yeah.
apartment buildings into that buffer zone.
64 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my confusion was. He's not moving where they are, correct?
No,
Okay,
He's
that's
not.
what I thought. I
It's
was
just
just
where
kind
the
of making
parking's
sure and
assigned.
clarifying that.
That was part of my question was as far as access to the residential buildings there is I don't want it to fill residential amongst the commercial. And I don't think either way, whether that's designated to commercial or designated to residential, if it's parking, it's gonna look the same, and nobody's gonna enforce that anyway.
Thing is,
That's what I was gonna say. You can't really enforce where your tenants are parking unless someone's gonna be there 24/7 to do it.
I just feel like we've gone from a sales tax zone that was supposed to be for sales tax to like 95% residential.
Yeah, I think in my mind, when we first envisioned this, that we would, the senior living community that has the commercial right on Center Street? I think it's Center Street. I thought that it was what it was gonna look more like, where you would see the commercial, which would represent what the purpose of the zone was, but the residential would be kind of secondary to that. And so this, to me, kind of switches that up, obviously. I mean, you're gonna see the you're gonna see the residential, and then the commercial's gonna be, at the corners. So, I don't know, it just is different than what I was thinking it was going to be. I'm not saying that's bad,
well,
but,
see, and I envisioned it on the first floor, all across the bottom, that was all restaurants and stuff. So
right.
it would have been parking lot, and then first floor retail, and then above that was the residential.
Well,
So
even the
it's just the
senior-
interpretation is
but-
different.
But even the senior living place, I feel like the parking is is there a buffer there with parking on
No,
off of
there's
No,
State
a
Street?
there's-
sidewalk and then the building.
No, but the senior building that you're saying, it is commercial
Yeah,
at the bottom. There is residential on top, but it looks 100% commercial.
right, because the parking is around back of it, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking?
there real quick.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's what I was, so that you wouldn't have even the show of the parking would even be hidden somewhat. And so, but like I said, that's why it's really dumb to make these decisions based on these concepts that we don't know how they're gonna turn out. So, okay, but it sounds like everyone is okay with that amendment as long as the language is cleaned up to reflect the things that were discussed. Daniel, are you clear on what that means? Okay,
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to say it in the motion to
yeah.
staff know what
So
we're
who
doing.
wants to
so.
take that on?
Peter? Peter and his shenanigans. I have to say, I'm impressed you used that word. It was
you.
wonderful.
See it reflected in
Want to
the-
name Tim by name.
We know what Tim's.
That's why I'm at the
yeah.
end.
It's just a good thing he's in Linden. There's businesses anyway.
Let's see, so, gotta get the right one. This is the first one, yeah, thank you. So, 3A, okay. I move the planning commission continue the request of McKay Christensen to amend city code section 10-14-27-3A, density of allowed uses in the boulevard mixed-use overlay zone until, what's our next one, March 11th? March 11th.
Sorry. Look at the agenda that we have. We won't have time to do it, and staff won't be able to do it. That's why I pointed out right
Want
now.
to go for the
25th?
25th then?
Yeah.
Okay, until March 25th, based on the following findings, that the language needs to be revised to restrict the presence of residential buildings in the buffer zone, but not residential parking.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Anyone want to make the second motion with regard to storage requirements?
You guys need to. I don't know.
May I put my glasses on? I move the planning commission continue the request of McKay Christensen to amend city code section 10-14-27-2E, storage in the boulevard mixed use overlay zone until Thursday, March 25th, based on the following findings, that the language again be crafted in such a way to reflect what we discussed.
Is that clear enough for you, Daniel?
Okay, second for that.
I'm not seconding that.
Second. All right, there's a motion by Commissioner Phillips, a second by Commissioner Beller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to,
Okay, see you soon.
we move on to reviewing the minutes from the February 11th meeting. Has anyone had a chance to do that?
I read through them briefly.
Any changes that need to be made? Such as passive voice, anything like that?
I didn't have time to do a deep dive that I wanted to, but I'll move to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Fugel and a second by Commissioner Phillips to approve the minutes from the February 11th meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That concludes our business today, so. Oh, that concludes our business. I will take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?